Hutch, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast. Jerry and I are honored to have you on. We've just been chatting away beforehand, and I had to put a pause to it. There was too much good stuff happening already, and I said, I'm going to forget to hit record here. So welcome. We're totally honored that you're here.
Oh, the honor's all mine. I have followed Jerry for a long time. I believe, I was a regular subscriber to Championship Performance, and there's lots of Jerry Lynch articles in there. So it's definitely I love doing things like this, and I certainly love spitballing and talking about what all of our passions are.
Mm-hmm. Well, we always consider these things like a couple of us sitting around, whether it's having a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever your beverage of choice is, and just chatting about coaching and people and all those things, and then just hitting record and sharing that with the world. And I know that our listeners really appreciate the wisdom that people like yourself have garnered over decades in the trenches coaching. And this is 300 and I think 9 episodes, and you're our first full-time softball coach. So you just introduced
Wow.
So that's our failure, not yours. But well, this is great that you're
well, we were just waiting for the best, and
we were. Yeah, we had to wait till you retired.
There's no apology necessary. It took a long time to get this woman.
It's awesome.
Yeah, we were just waiting.
I guarantee I won't be your last.
Yeah,
there's a lot of great coaches on our side of the diamond.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jerry wants to kick it off this week. So, Jerry, go ahead.
Do I want to do that?
You do, yeah.
Oh, I will, for sure. So think of these names: Oprah, Bono, Beyonce, Madonna, Shaq, Tiger, and now we have Hutch. Oh my gosh. This is an extraordinary group of people. And, you can't say Jerry and not think of about 1,000 people. But what I'm wondering is, you're known by one name. Everybody I talk to. Oh, no, it's Hutch, not Carol. No, it's Hutch. And how does that feel? What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I guess in softball particularly, I don't know if it's true of all sports, but we are a nickname-oriented group, and I was really more Carol in high school, with all my high school friends still call me Carol. They know I'm Hutch, but they call me Carol, and of course my mom called me Carol. But my dad was the original Hutch, and he called me Hutcher. But no question, I think it's you're fortunate when you can have a name that can be synonymous in one syllable. Bo, of course, was a big name around here. And, I don't think it guarantees you anything, but it certainly is. It's easier for people to remember my name. And when they meet me, and they always look at me and say, "Where's Starsky?" And I always think that's, but
there's a sense of, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when I say Hutch, I can't say it without feeling some kind of affection. It's more than just a name. Like Carol, there are many Carols. There's one Hutch, or in your case, your dad. But it seems like when people are willing to call you Hutch, it's less formal. It's less worrisome about, is this the right thing to do? But there's that sense of connection and caring about you, and all the people that I've talked to who know you, it's just that they love you, and it's Hutch. That's what it is. And so, that's what I think about.
Well, I didn't really ever go by coach. When I first got in the profession, I worked in Indiana for Gail Blevins, and she insisted that, her thing was we are called coach, and the kids knew me as Hutch. I had just gotten done playing against a lot of them. And then when I came here, I worked for Bob DeCarolis, who you may know from Oregon State for many years. And, he was on a first name basis. So Hutch was kind of a moniker that gave me a little bit of distance, maybe, but yet definitely a term of endearment as well, as people knew me. And definitely, I think the big thing with when you're coaching kids, and I was a young kid when I started, but you want them to be able to identify with you as a person first. I mean, because they're people first, and somehow being able to call me Hutch has always been helpful to them to just identify with me as Hutch. And I always tell kids, when I'm mad at you and I call you by your full name, like my mom would be
like
mad
your
at me and
parents.
say Carol Sue, and I knew I was in hot water. So
Yeah.
I often would just call a kid by their real name and I give everybody a nickname, like my dad. The minute I meet them, something that rhymes with their name or something dumb, and that reminds me of them. And we had a kid on our team last year named Melena. She's still on the team, and she spells it Melina. So guess when she came to us, she was a transfer. I couldn't keep that name right to save my life. So I finally just called her Malinka, because that made me laugh, and it made her look at me like I was, what is wrong with her? But then I still, when I see her, I say, hey, Malinka. So I'd like to, that's my way of endearing to young people, is I always have a nickname for almost everybody.
Well, it's funny. My daughter's 17 and her name's Maggie and her middle name is Shay. And like 3 months ago, she asked me how to spell her middle name. And I'm like, wow, you must not have gotten in trouble enough as a kid, because like this whole thing is just not part of your vernacular right now. So, yeah, no, I love that idea. Because I mean, I think part of being a coach and a mentor and a teacher is that human connection, that one-to-one connection. It's absolutely critical. And then part of it is maintaining that healthy distance, because your players have, they have a lot of opportunities for people to be their friend, but they only got one coach or two coaches or whatever it is, right? And absolutely. I say it to parents as well, right? Your kids have lots of friends. They only got one mom and dad. Be a parent, be a coach. So how do you do that? How do you maintain that?
Well, I think it's exactly right for me. I'm not their friend. And that's the hardest thing for young people today. We talk about young people today, but they're raised by people who are their friends. And then they meet me, and I'm not their friend. And I'm here to push you out of your comfort zone and stretch you to a place you've never been, so you can grow into something that you become. And it's done with love, but love comes in a lot of forms. And when you're demanding of somebody, when you're holding them to high standards, you're loving them. And, some of that's teaching them. But the most important thing we do is we coach and raise the person. We really, over my many years of coaching, I realize all I'm doing is growing these young people up into strong, powerful women. That is what I'm really doing. I use a ball and a bat. Jim Harbaugh uses a football and a blocking dummy, and you can go on and on. But we use all the experiences that we have in trying to come together with a common vision to accomplish great things as a team, and they learn every lesson they need in life. They don't really need books. I don't understand why they have to go to class, because the finest classroom on the campus is on my field now, and it could be on a few other fields too, in courts. But I believe when my student athletes come back, and I have over 200 alums now, and I have about 170 of them in my cell phone, and they come back and that's what they talk about. And they come back and say, oh my God, you're always right 20 years later. Oh, you were right. But they can handle life better than most. And that's what we prepare them for. We make it difficult. We knock them down and say, get up. And then they get up. They're like, wow. And then that's how you empower kids.
I love what you just said. And it reminds me of a quote of a late college baseball coach. And I forget who it was now, but the gist of the quote was, in my career, he was religious, and he said, the Lord gave me 600 boys to turn into men. What a shame if I only turned them into baseball players. What would I say at the pearly gates then? And that's your whole thing as well, right? That we're in the people development business, and softball's the vehicle.
Absolutely. It's absolutely the vehicle. And, so that came in the second half of my career probably, but the first part of your career, you're just really surviving. And especially in that era of the 80s, when I got into it, you were just you were keeping your head above water. We couldn't even get to the dirt, Every day was spent just trying to get to practice and put our kids on a somewhat quality surface. So, it's yours. It comes with experience. You can't, experience is the best teacher if you allow it, of course.
Is part of that transformation of you, that evolvement of you of a coach, is that, you know, like in the beginning you're surviving, and we'll get into the talk about facilities and Title IX and things like that. There's that level of survival, but is there also a level of survival of, and we got to win just to keep our job? That makes it maybe a little more transactional than you want it to be, or just as a young coach, no one's ever taught me what this is really supposed to be about?
Well, I think your brain hasn't fully matured yet. You know, as college kids are a good example. And even as when I started in coaching, I was named the head coach when I was what was I, 28? Came here in 20, I was 26, and I'm still a kid. And yeah, you think you're here to win games. I mean, that makes sense. And I played ball. I played very competitive women's major Fastpitch. I played in college at Michigan State University. And, you know, I look back, and the reason I got into coaching was because I had such a great experience. The experience of being with teammates, the experience of winning together, of losing together, of crying together, drinking together, all the things we shared. And I wanted to be that person that was in charge of all that and helped shape all those experiences. And so that, I don't think it's ever been lost on me, but when you're young and just starting out, and I remember this because I never made much money. I was the kid out of our 6 kids. I got a summer job so I could buy a bike so I could ride to softball practice, because my mom, who had 5 other kids, is like, how are you going to get there? So I worked to sustain my habits, which were playing. And I never had much money. I always stowed it away like a squirrel. And then when I started coaching, I was part-time. I didn't make very much money, but I was always frugal. I got that from my mom. And I always lived, when I finally got a financial planner, I said, well, I always have to have enough money in case I get fired. Because that was kind of how I viewed it. If I don't do well, and obviously if I don't win, I won't coach anymore. I'll get fired. And I lived in fear of that. That was in the back of my mind. And with all my financial planning, I'm happy to say I finally I didn't get fired, and I have enough money to live on. So
a lot of softball coaches don't get long-term contracts with guaranteed buyouts, do they?
Not too many. No.
Jerry, go ahead, man.
A few.
I just want to listen. I don't want to talk, you know, because you're really verbalizing so much of what sports is all about for John and I, and the listeners that are there. They want to understand this, and hearing it from you, it's so much more powerful than hearing it from me, because you've been in the trenches. You've done this. You've been there before. And this whole idea of sports being a kind of a microcosmic classroom for all of life. The key is, how can you keep that focus while at the same time not worry about whether you're going to be getting your paycheck or you're not going to have a job, you know? And so we can understand that. And wouldn't it be lovely if I walked into an organization, they said, Jerry, you got this job for the rest of your life. You'll never be fired. Just do good work. Just do good work. And it has nothing to do with winning, and you'll get paid, and you'll have a job and everything else. Then I could see where I would really be more inclined to be able to buy into that idea of the microcosmic classroom of life, because really that's what it is. And every coach out there would agree with us today, but there is that underlying fear. You know what I'm saying?
And I think, especially with people who are not really entrenched in their career yet, they're still creating it. You know, you really evolve into who you become as a coach, and who I am today. I certainly didn't start that way. And I know I've talked to various coaches at various stages of their career, and ultimately, you know, first of all, I'm a true believer that when you can create an environment that is safe, that is productive with your student athletes, that is positive largely, which again, in today's environment, we have so many challenges, but most things take care of themselves. And I mean, all we're trying to do, and I have many a person come out to me and say, well, I'm just a Division III coach. I'm just a high school coach. I'm like, you are not just. There is no qualifier. You're a coach. I'm a coach. You're a coach. We all do the same thing. We're trying to get the most out of the people we have, and we're trying to get the most out of them. Again, we're using the vehicle of softball. So people normally are like, if Hutch is acting like she didn't care about winning, she is lying, because that is true. I never walked in that dugout and didn't have this intensity about playing the game and playing it well and winning the game.
Yeah.
But without a doubt, if those things end up taking care of themselves, you'll get most out of your kids. And some years I have to stop. You have to have time for reflection. I used to be the master of taking Monday, and that was my day. We didn't have practice, and I'd go in the woods with my dog. I'd go on a long bike ride. I'd go do something and refresh myself. And then I come back Tuesday. I'm like, I feel better. I got it. I think I know where we need to go. But now we get so stuck to the grindstone, you can't reflect. And you have to look at your team and say, did I get the most out of this group? You have to look at your talent limitations. You need a certain amount of talent, but can I get more out of my talent? And did my talent, even though the talent didn't get better over the years, did I get more out of that kid each year?
Yeah.
And the things that you have to look at. But it has become winner. It's become we're in education for a reason. We're part of an institution. We're part of the high school. We're part of education. And somebody just told me this the other day. We're the only country in the world that isn't have like everything is like Club Manchester and Club this and Club that. But we have everything's university here. And I'm like, really? I didn't even realize that. And we're part of the educational system for a reason. That's why we got to get funded for this. And we got to figure out a way to maintain that. Got a little big.
Isn't one of the problems, I think, in sport, and this would not just be at the university level, but at the high school level and down, I think one of the problems is that for me, sport that's attached to a university or to a high school should be not extracurricular, but co-curricular. The things that we value and do in the classroom, the values of the institution, should be reflected on the sports field. And oftentimes they're not. Oftentimes they're sometimes the antithesis of what we say we value in school. And I think this is confusing for kids. It opens the door for parents to be confused or to be scared. And this is a problem. And I think the best coaches are the ones who are able to connect the two. And the best athletic departments are the ones that are able to connect the two as well. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that I speak the most when I speak to groups about culture, the culture of your program. And I believe it's the foundation and the whatever those things are called in a house that hold the house up, support beam of the whole thing.
Joyce.
And thank you. And so really our secret sauce for years was we talk about only 20 women in the world wear the Block M. I think I have one on here, and play softball. 20 women in the universe. That is your place. You need to understand the privilege that you have to represent this world-class institution. I was speaking to Division II and III coaches yesterday. It doesn't matter if it's Michigan or Denison University or whoever, you are representing this institution of higher learning, and it's sacred. And kids need to understand this is sacred, that you get to wear this. And if you don't wear it right, you don't get to wear it. You represent something bigger than yourself. You represent the entire program every day. And it's 24/7. It isn't sometimes. It's not just when I walk on the field. It's not just when I decide I want to go to the weight room or go to my classes. Everybody knows you're a student athlete and you represent this university. And to me, my dad was a cop. He was a state trooper. He was a Marine. He polished his shoes every day. He polished his holster belt. He was spit shined. He was a Marine. And that's a value that I learned is you're going to treat this and you're going to wear it right, or you won't wear it. And when they realize it's just a choice of being above the line or below it, it's a choice. And, we sometimes have to teach them how to make better choices. But at some point, this isn't for everybody. Yeah. And so that is how I was able to build this culture here, because these kids recognize that they are a part of something. They talk about it all their senior speeches. They talk about being a part of something bigger than themselves and leaving the program better. Your job is to leave it better. Our job as citizens is to leave the world better.
Yeah,
Like
you
I
leave.
walk through a parking lot, I pick up the trash. I walk down the street. I'm like, why is there trash in the street?
Yeah.
Pick it up. It's not my trash either, but it's our trash. Pick it up.
Yeah, you
So
leave the shirt in a better place, leave the program in a better place. And I think the beautiful thing about those seniors on that sort of when they're leaving is they don't all come in thinking that way, right? Especially now there's a lot of entitlement and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's a battle that you fight as a coach to change the thinking from me to we, and that I'm part of something bigger than me, and this is the moment where the sun shines upon me here with the M on my chest, but someone else is going to wear it after me, and a lot of people wore it before me, and my duty is to make them proud and give back. And that transformation that you watch people go through, I think is winning a national championship is awesome. Winning a Big 10 championship is awesome, but watching people make that transformation is why you coach.
absolutely. And many of our championships are a result of those kids coming together and achieving maybe more than they would have otherwise. I'm certain of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What, I mean, how do you work through this as a coach? I mean, in you talk about your time just trying to survive, in your words, as a young coach, and then you have this record and sort of a little more security, and now you're maybe thriving. But how have you adapted to how society has changed, to culture has changed, to how kids have changed? I mean, we had Tara Vanderveer on here last year or 2 years ago after she won a national championship. What was it, Jerry? 25 years apart. And we're like, you're still at the top that far apart. You're reaching a whole another generation of children who grew up with a phone in their hands. How have you done that? And so I'll throw that question to you as well. Like, how do you, what remains a non-negotiable for you, and where have you been willing to give a little bit to connect with kids that are different than they were 30 years ago?
Well, I still maintain that the biggest difference in kids is how they're parented.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I believe this is parenting at its finest, or however you want to term that, because kids, they're a product of their environments. You know, I mean, I grew up in a house of 6 kids and with a cop and a Marine for a dad. And I mean, if I went on a date, he would do a background check on the guy and see if he had a rap sheet. My luck, and of course, my luck was he did, so that didn't work out. But you know, I think it's still non-negotiables. We're about the team first. Teaching kids, it takes more time and intentionality as we bring them into the program, what that looks like and what that means. And, you know, as I talk to coaches, I'm like, everything in your messaging has to come back to what your core value is, which is in ours, it's how does this affect your team? Whether the kid who skips class, okay. And to be honest, sometimes I would just throw them out of practice. And now I might be like, look, the rest of your team sacrifices whatever it is they'd rather do to go to class. And you not making that sacrifice because you just want to, you know, sleep in, whatever it is, it's a slap in the face to your teammates. Do you not care about your teammates because they're making sacrifices every day for what we ask of you all? And that's just a simple, you know, example, but we try to bring it back to those things so that they do understand it better. We move the needle. Do they understand it fully? I don't know. Not by the time they come back to a reunion, they're pretty far along, but everybody learns on different timetables. Mm-hmm. And some kids, you know, I think are still learning, and they've been gone for a couple of years. They're still trying to figure that out. But just, you know, everything we talk about has to be the same type of messaging. But yet I think in years past, I'd write a letter to the parent before the season started. Dear parent, either leave your kid in Ann Arbor with me or take her home with you. Love, Hutch. And then that was the short version. And now we Zoom with them a couple times, you know, throughout the year. And I think Bonnie, our new head coach, is going to do it a couple times a semester. We have to communicate with them more. We have to bring them on board to understand what we do and how we do it, why we do it. And you have to do more of that with your kids. You have to educate at a higher level. It is no longer we're doing this because I said, and this is an authoritarian model. And we try to give them input into things. And the funny thing is, a few years ago, I said, I'd come in PowerPoint. These are the rules of the air, and no cell phones on the bus and all these rules. I said, I put up the PowerPoint and they're all waiting for it. And there's nothing on it. I said, I want you to get in groups. I want you to come up with the team rules that we can live with. Rules that will keep us, all in the same boundaries. And they came up with the exact same rules by large. And then they had better ownership of them. But the one rule that definitely changed was cell phones. They wanted more access to their phones at different times. And we agreed that on the bus on the way from the hotel to the game, we would turn them off. We would turn them off in the locker room once we ate our pregame meal, and then they were, an hour away from warming up. So we came to some compromise. And that was big for me because I was anti-cell phone, and I realized I was fighting an uphill battle that was never going to be won. So I felt that, giving them input into some things, putting together leadership councils. So you've got a group of kids weighing in on things that are coming down the pipe. I bring them in and talk about it more. It's more time. It's more time spent on helping them understand, because they have to understand the why. Because if you want them to be on your page, they have to understand the why. And they're in, because they think they're entitled to understand and weigh in on it, to be honest. So we give them a lot more opportunity. I think, did I do great at that? I did better at it. I don't know if I ever did great at it.
But you've been at this game a long time, the game of sports, the game of life. And Hutch, you'd have to agree with me that cell phones, social media, all these things, it's really changed the landscape. But what hasn't changed, I believe, and I think you've noticed this perhaps, is what they really crave. So whether it's 40 years ago or today, they still crave. They crave the same things. They crave the attention. They crave the love. They crave the connection, the caring, approval, right? I mean, whether you're on the diamond in 1972 or you're on the diamond in 2022, it's all the same. And I think for coaches listening out there, I think a lot of them are overwhelmed because they think they have to change their coaching based on all of the electronical shifts and what have you in life. And I just want them to be sure that you as a coach would agree that let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we want to do is we want to make sure we don't lose touch with the most important elements of what these athletes crave. I mean, athletes will go the distance for you if they feel important, if they feel relevant, if they feel approved of, if they feel all of these wonderful elevated feelings. They'll go the distance with you. And Steve Kerr told me recently, he said, Jerry, the most important game I ever won, and this is a conversation about championship winning. He says, back in 2015, the most important game I won was the relationship game. And it's one thing to understand the technological shifts and changes and what have you, but there's something about the human nature that just never, ever changes, whether it's 1652 or 2052. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I do think that a lot of things are slanted by the advent of cell phones and especially social media. And social media is just a brutal animal for these kids, but it's what they know. It's what they do now. I mean, I used to go to the library, and I mean, kids don't even, they were like, they don't know how to spell library. And, and so we do spend time navigating some of these things and the reality is they are affected by a lot more. They have so much more on their plate, which is where they get discombobulated, that keeping it all straight. And all the people they're trying to please. And they want to please you. They want to please your parents more than anything. So it's why it's important that parents don't mean to, but they can personally undermine the exact thing we're trying to create, because that kid is they're going to be loyal to me, but not more than they are to their parents. If their parents set them in a direction like anti-coach, or the coaches are dumb, or what are they doing, it plays on them. It messes them up, which then messes everything else up. But I do agree that we have to understand what the influences are that get to them, and how they can. Social media has created this, world of anxiety, which, I talk to people. My favorite thing to talk about when I'm speaking to groups, I speak to the Rotary Club, I speak to everybody. I'm like, I work with the overprivileged. I work with you get to go to college. Many of you get to have a scholarship. You get a degree. You get to play the game you love. You get all sorts of cool stuff and swag and tennis shoes and travel the world. Your life is not hard. They think their parents are like, oh, it's so hard for her. It's what she signed up for, and it's really not. We have to teach them how to take one bite of the apple at a time. You don't stick the whole apple down your throat. And that's what we're teaching them, all these life skills, but it's a lot more complicated, because their world is a lot more complicated. And I mean, a few years ago, I would have canceled social media, like everybody off. A lot of schools went dark. They would have gone dark during
the season.
Walton, Florida said they went dark during the season. And I'm like, I'm going to do that. And then you can't tell them to do anything. I mean, you just can't violate any rights. So, but we talk about it. We definitely spend time talking about the social media, the terrible comments. And I call them, if they're not in our bubble, they're not in this room, which is our strength coach and our trainer and anybody who's in our bubble. They're not in our bubble. They're the stupid people. And why would you let the stupid people in your bubble? And keep them out. It refers to a lot of people that are in their world, right? But they're the stupid people. They are not part of what we're doing. The stupid people say, oh, Michigan, you're playing who? A mid-major? Oh, you'll win. I'm like, oh, the stupid people. Don't listen to them. You have to play.
I mean, Jerry, remember how I think it was Steve and even Steve Kerr, Quinn Snyder, talk about in the NBA, you walk into a locker room at halftime and everyone's on Twitter seeing what the stupid people are saying about them.
No way.
And at the highest level. And they're like, you can't, you have to like trust your people, but they are more likely to pay attention to a stranger on Twitter than they are
people.
The coach. Yeah. And I like the stupid people. It's just a great analogy. I'll write a blog post called The Stupid People sometime soon.
I like that.
I'll help you with that. So John, I'd like to kind of shift gears here a little bit, because I'm so aware, Hutch, you're so dynamic in so many ways, but there's something that really, really jumps off the page at me. This past year, and you might be familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Christine Grant.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. There's no question. Well, we lost her this past year, and she was a dear friend, and I've had the honor of spending time in her company. And for those of you who don't know who she is, but she was one of the most influential pioneers in the battle for Title IX back in the day. Hutch, you've been a trailblazer advocate for Title IX for all women in athletics and what have you. I'm wondering if you would be so humble and would you recount some of your experience with this when you were, I believe, a student athlete at Michigan State, and something came up and you jumped right in? I think that the listeners would love to hear that story.
Well, I graduated from high school in 1975. So in 1972, when that law passed, I was a sophomore in high school. And, I never played high school softball because we didn't have it. It wasn't until my senior year, they started the MHSAA, Michigan High School Association, put on a high school basketball tournament for the girls, which basketball was my first love. Come to find out, I wasn't as good at it, but beside the point. And I was so excited because I finally went from playing in these girls' athletic activity events, which were like 4 or 5 scrimmages after school. We'd all get in the gym teacher's car and drive to the local high school and play each other in pennies. And you masking tape your numbers on. And I always wore number 11 because of this one little tape.
Yeah.
Who wanted to be 44 or something. And so, but anyway, I went on to college, and I played basketball at Michigan State as well as softball. And a story that I know this isn't what you're referring to, but is my freshman year, and we were playing a rare chance to play in their big facility, Jennison Fieldhouse, because we always practice in subpar gyms. We practiced where the gymnastics team practiced, so there was chalk everywhere. And it was just a bad, it wasn't comparable. Mm-hmm. And so we're warming up in Jennison. We're going to play a doubleheader with the men's team the next day. And here came the opponent for the men's team. The whole team walks in, all these humongous guys. And I go, we're not on the building schedule. And sure enough, our coach came over to us and said, girls, you're going to have to go upstairs to that crappy gym. And we kind of balked at him, like, we're not going. It's our time. We took a moment and thought we were something. And here came the world famous Hall of Fame coach walked over to us. We all gathered now. We say in today's world, we'd all get our cameras out, selfie with him. And we think he's going to give us a pep talk. And he did. He said, girls, get off the court because nobody gives a damn about women's basketball. Mm-hmm. And so I was a happy-go-lucky dog, and I turned into it started my growing up as an adult, but going through college, the disparities. I went to high school with Magic Johnson. He was a sophomore when I was a senior, and his career and mine at Michigan State were like this, right? Everything is full scholarship. They took charter planes, and they get lavish meals, and we took the coaches put us in station wagons and drove us around the Big Ten in snowstorms. And, we got a little bit of per diem and thought, wow, they give us money to eat at McDonald's. We eat McDonald's all the time. But my senior year, this is not my brainchild, but two of our former players, one, Kathy DeBoer, who is the executive director of the ABCA, and then my roommate, Cookie Mankowski, they were not playing anymore. They were done. And they had been talking to a lawyer in Ann Arbor, just up the road, Gene King, famous Title IX fighter, advocate. And so we drove down, and our track coach went with us, Mark Pittman, and we filed a lawsuit against Michigan State. It was a Title IX suit, which then turned into a civil suit. And we ended up in federal court up in Grand Rapids one day, during our season. And we drove up there, and I did not personally testify. A couple of my teammates did. They sat up on the stand, and the lawyers for the men's side, or for the athletic director, were like, well, where'd you go to eat? And we'd say, well, we ate at Ponderosa. Well, what did you get? And my buddy says, well, we could get a baked potato, but we couldn't afford to get the sour cream, and how, we got less money type of thing. And the lawyer says, well, don't you guys eat less than the men? And she kind of looked at him. First of all, no. And she said, well, it costs the same. And so the judge came out in about 20 minutes, boom, slam. It was a slam dunk. It was, I went home, ABC News was calling my apartment, and it was one of the first landmark cases. And we ended up making it was a civil suit. And at that time it was required that the university provide us the same resources. We find charter buses. We finally stepped 2 to a room and 1 to a bed versus we crammed 4 or 5 people in the room. We had adequate per diem, and it didn't affect the other sports, however, was the downside of that case. But it was landmark. And back in those days, I mean, there was a lot of lawsuits flying, and a lot of people lost their jobs. Our Title IX advocate on campus was fired. Our affirmative action officer was fired because she's supposed to represent the university, and she was just doing what was right, which is actually what she was supposed to do. And we saw a lot of it along the way. There's a lot of turmoil in the 70s and all the way through the 80s. A lot of reluctance. Nobody wanted to adopt the women's programs. And then they said, well, we'll let you have teams, but we're not going to spend very much money on you. And then lawsuits, because the penalty for not complying is you lose your federal funding, which is a big deal at most institutions.
Right, but that's never been enforced, right? I mean, that's the problem, the 50th anniversary. Yeah.
Not one school's ever lost their federal funding. And the problem is enforcement. Enforcement's left up to me, the advocate for the women, to come in and say, things are pretty out of whack. The boys get this and we're not getting it. And then they look at you and say, I don't think your kids like you. And then next thing you know, you don't have a job. So we need a better enforcement. We need better outside evaluation tools.
Just going back a little bit, that you said that was 1975?
That was 1979 of the lawsuit.
Okay. Because 1976, there was a shift in Title IX, because the original one, as I recall, in 92 and 72, it was university wide, and then wasn't it specific for sports only? In 76, they came out with an addendum to that or something.
Well, they tried to fight it in at the congressional level, and even our own athletic director here at Michigan lobbied Congress. He said it would ruin college football if we funded the women the way we were attempting to. If they had to have equality, it was going to ruin college football. So we see where that's gone. And so there was some amendments proposed that would take football out of the mix, which again, there's 100+ men playing football, and this is about opportunities for men and versus opportunities for women. It's an opportunity thing. So most purists would say we can't take the men out of the mix because that's the whole point. And so there was some back and forth with that, and that is still always proposed. Or what's happened is athletic directors with football where it's at today are just running rampant with football, and nobody's stepping in and saying, we have to take a look at this. If you're a female administrator in an administration, they're going to cut you off at the knees, and they're going to find a way to quiet you and silence you. And enforcement is at an all-time low, in my opinion.
Well, two years ago, right? It was the NCAA women's basketball tournament that,
great example.
The bubble in San Antonio and the weight room, which looked like the one at my Hilton versus like, a real weight room. Yeah, exactly. And just, I mean, for me, what's mind boggling in this day and age is sort of like, what made you think you could get away with that? Someone wouldn't say anything. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, and some of the systemic discrimination that is rampant in our society at all different levels is who is in charge of the women's basketball tournament is an underling to who runs all the tournaments when runs the men's tournament. And she walks in, or he or she is just like, this is fine. They have no idea. Meanwhile, they don't realize the men are building a weight room of mammoth proportions. And I wish it was as nice as the Hilton I just stayed in, because it wasn't even close.
Right.
And it's how the systems, how they're set up. So men are in positions of power to make decisions, and women are not. And whoever thought that was just okay. And then they had to, but the minute that it was exposed, they backtrack immediately because they don't like to look bad. But in fact, we need more things to be outed. And we had the same thing occurred that same year at our Women's College World Series. We were playing games till 2 a.m. and hopping kids back on the field 12 hours later to play an if game, an if necessary game, or a elimination game, all in the sake of saving money so that we could keep our tournament, which is the same number of games as the men's tournament. They gave us 6 days and they were giving the men 11.
Yeah.
And they'd say, well, yeah. And it's all because the first thing they would say with women is, what can we do to save money? Like, how can we run this tournament, run it nice, but save money? And then with the men, they're like, so these are the issues. They're systemic. They're still happening. And they're happening on campuses, because when you think about who is the NCAA, they are every institution in the country that participates. That's who the NCAA is.
I really appreciate you exposing that, because coming from you, it makes a hell of a lot more sense than from me. John and I are both aware of that. We've had many talks with coaches like Tara Vanderveer at Stanford and Cindy Timshall at Navy and what have you. And it's just deplorable how that could be in this day and age, and how much power is yielded by the male population in this world. Change, yeah, but compared to what's going on with the men, it's nowhere. It's not a question that women and men are equal. We're looking at an equal opportunity, as you so well stated before.
Well, Jerry, can I just throw something in, Hutch? And I don't want to jump on top, but I think this is important. And I heard, Julie Foudy, who's now with ESPN, but captain of the women's national team, she, soccer, she talks about this. Like, you can't compare, say, audiences in women's professional soccer versus men's in the United States until you say, well, how much marketing money did you throw in for 20 years to get it to that point? And like one of the fascinating things about soccer as a sport is prior to World War II, women's soccer used to fill the biggest stadiums in England. 80,000 people, 90,000 people will watch. And then the English FA banned women from playing soccer, right? And ended it. But they would sell out huge stadiums, right? And then they go, well, it doesn't draw any people. Well, it's because you put an end to that. And so, right, it's this equity starts with put in the marketing dollars, make it viable, like women's soccer has started to do a little bit, but certainly did in like the 99 World Cup. Like all of a sudden, wow, that looks like it's something great to watch. If you do that, now you can talk about, well, this doesn't generate as much money as this other one does.
Well, it's evolving. Again, we're in year 46. This is team 46, Michigan softball. Baseball's team 150 something. Like it does take some evolution, but it does take investment on the front end. It's like your 401k. If you don't put money in, you don't get money out. And Julie Foudy talks about in one of the ESPN Title IX series how once they did force their hand to pay them, they started investing more because now they wanted to get their money back.
Yeah.
And but across the board, the NCAA is spending way more money on its men's championships, and those are a lot of marketing dollars and so forth, than they are in their female championships across the board.
Yep. No, I hear you. I mean, during COVID, I was working with a collegiate field hockey team, and we finished the year during our sort of COVID season with the number 7 RPI, and we didn't go to the NCAA tournament because they had squeezed the tournament down to 10 teams or something. And it was like, you gotta be kidding me,
Yeah. It's about opportunity, but men's and women's golf, men take more men to the golf tournament than the women do. And it's a budget issue.
Yeah.
So somebody just needs to call them on it. And I don't know. I mean, they leave it up. The coaches can't do it. We're in a bad spot, but I think the law, Jean King taught me a lot of things, but she really taught me the law only works if you use it. And I advise people often. I'm just that age. I've been around a while, and I advise people all the time on how to go after contracts that are fair to them. I mean, across the board, women's softball coaches make less money than the baseball coaches. Market value. That's the word. You got to have a reason, right? Used to be because, I mean, I was young and inexperienced, so I couldn't make they said, well, so you don't make as much as baseball. And then I was not young. I was way more experienced and way more successful. Well, market value. And it's never ending. It's a never ending fight. And it gets exhausting. We get tired of it.
And that's what they're hoping. They're hoping that you get exhausted, because when you get tired of it, it's like you lose it. And
and people fear for their careers.
The thing I loved about Christine Grant was to the day she died, she was writing and speaking about everything that you're talking about. What a great spirit.
Yeah, I agree.
What I'm thinking of, Jerry. Jerry sent me this clip the other day of Carol Lawson, the Duke basketball coach, and her talking to her team and saying something along the lines of, you know what? It doesn't get easier, right? You're here. It doesn't get easier. School doesn't get easier.
It's going to get easier. Life doesn't get easier.
Sport doesn't get easier. And life doesn't get easier.
You get better at doing hard.
That's exactly what she said. She said, you are doing this to build the capacity to do hard things because it will never get easier. And I think that's what you're talking about as well, that in 4 decades of coaching, it didn't get easier, but what you learned was the ability to endure more and fight bigger battles. And that's what you're doing now. And I think this is what we're teaching those 18 to 22-year-olds at a college team, what we're teaching the 14 to 18-year-olds on our high school team is I'm giving you the capacity to endure more. And it's not by making you comfortable, it's making you uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's the only way you get stronger. You lift weights that make you uncomfortable, right?
Well,
I like speaking on Title IX. This year at Michigan, I said, what are we doing for Title IX? Well, everybody's getting a t-shirt. And so they put stickers on their helmets, and they're all And I said, we need to teach them what it means, because once you understand history, it's just history.
Yeah.
The history of what it used to look like, the history of where we are now. It gives everybody a lens that they didn't have. They don't, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, they walk into a facility and they realize, why is that baseball field so much nicer than this softball field? Things that they, you just become immune to things. You walk by something every day and you're like, the weeds are just part of the facility. You kind of lose sight of it.
And there's coach painting the lines.
Yeah. One of my players said on an alumni Zoom a couple nights ago, she goes, the first day I met Hutch, I came out to the field, or it's her first day on campus. I was up painting the backstop. And I just like, oh my God, that's right. So,
Hutch, I got a question. We're getting near the end of our time, although I don't want to see this as an ending. I want to see it as a beginning, and I think I have ways that we can make that happen. But having said that, you have a power, not over, but you have the power to influence a lot of people. And I think single-handedly, you have the power to create happiness and joy to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And knowing that, if you believe me, you probably would want to create that. And these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, you're smiling, and I think you know what's coming. But what are the chances of you returning to the game? These people are going to be so joyful when they hear that.
Well,
in some form. I mean, not maybe, maybe not in the dugout, or hitting fungo bats,
Well, I'd like to think I haven't left the game. I don't really feel like I've left the game. I coach. I still coach. I coached 150 women yesterday at a coaches conference, and I still coach my players that are around or shortly removed. I'm just not their softball. I don't teach softball anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach, and I'm still have my passion intact. I've redirected it from the softball field and from yelling at umpires and children for a living to really spreading some knowledge and wisdom. I think there's a lot to be said for when people understand our history. The year of Title IX has been perfect. Because I've always wanted to be a college professor. So I've spent a lot of time speaking in classes, and, I like to share the word. I think there's so much to be done, and there's so many people that are really shocked at where we still stand on equity. Like, we still can't define what equal and equity are. We were defining it. Mm-hmm. I was on a White House task force for gender equity with all basketball coaches. Tara was on it, and Dawn Staley, and I was the random softball coach. They knew that I had been outspoken, and they invited me on it. And they were these White House bureaucrats were trying to figure out where the issues are in sport and the inequities. And finally, my comment was, you're not having this conversation with any of the men's sports. Do you notice there's no men involved? This is the whole point. We have to we can't even define what equal is. So, life is challenging.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Sandy Barber told us, I'm retiring, but I'm not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm not going away.
That's awesome.
So I'm around. I love I love Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan. I could never see myself being a coach anywhere else, but I love to coach coaches. It's really my passion, and I want them to, they need a lot of support, because they have a lot of fighting still to do, and we don't want to be fighting, but in fact, they have to learn. Help teach people how to stand up for themselves, because women don't ask.
Well, those people who are expecting joy and happiness from you coming back as a coach need to understand that you are coaching, and what you're doing is really you're taking it to another level. As I see, you use sport as a vehicle to transport these youngsters to places they've never been able to experience before, and now you're looking at it from the top, and you're looking down and you're seeing the whole perspective. And what you're doing is, after this hour or so with you, you're teaching, you're coaching, you're really hitting the nail on the head of what's really important on that softball diamond. And now you have that opportunity to do that and really devote a lot of time. I think it's a pretty exciting time for you, I would imagine.
It has been, it certainly is rewarding, and I've enjoyed every time I've done a number of things like this. And I don't know if I've done anything that was so insightful, but it's fun. It's you get to live your passions. I get to choose what I like to do, and I'm very passionate with everything I do, whether it's play golf or drink good beer. I'm passionate about it. Only drink good beer.
Yeah.
Why waste your time with
right.
the stupid beers?
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And I don't drink with the stupid people.
I don't drink with the
stupid people. Yeah. Hutch, every once in a while, Jerry and I do a podcast. I think that we're both like, wow, we wish that went 3 hours. And this, I think, is one of them, because there's so much more we could dive into, but we want to be respectful of your time. So I want to kind of give you the last word, and just, is there anything that maybe you wish we asked about that we didn't? Or if not, in any parting thoughts or wisdom, because I know you've made a great difference in the lives of all the coaches / parents who are listening to this today. This was a wonderful talk.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. I appreciate being able to be on this and talk about these things. And you guys are clearly very interested in, and you too want to leave the world better. I can tell. And I think that you are, as you reach a lot of people. People ask me a lot of times what I miss the most as, being this retiree. And I don't feel retired, but I said, I miss my colleagues. I miss my office. I miss my immediate people. And of course, being in the dugout every day. But, I had such a great network. And I've always been a people person first. When I played ball at Michigan State, I loved all the players on Western Michigan's team. They were our arch rivals, and we were buddies. And I'd slide into second and punch him in and say, hey, I made it. Or I'd be out. And, I was never into the hate thing, and rivalry, dumb stuff. And so, our teams, we prepare our teams to play on the field. We take a lot of pride in what we do and how our teams perform. But ultimately, I believe we leave it on the field. And then I'm playing, and maybe, John, you're coaching the other team. And I want to come over and visit with you. I don't know how you're doing and how your season's going and how's your athletic director treat you, and, what's your dog's name? And, I want to have I had a fantastic network of people I consider colleagues and friends. And it transcended the fact that we wanted to beat the crap out of each other during games. We leave it on the field and respect each other's what we do. And, it's my kids performing. And if they didn't perform well, I certainly take it to heart and go back to the drawing board. But so many people go into a shell and they think they have to, all their competitors. And I think that's unfortunate, because you're missing out on some of the greatest joys of what you get to do, because we are in a people business, and everybody's people, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's the people you work with, it's your players, it's the other players. I mean, I still stay in touch. Many a kid who turned me down and I was their second choice. Kids who went the transfer portal, they all texted me that when I retired. And, it's a beautiful thing. Enjoy it. Life is short. Don't take yourself so serious.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Well, Hutch, this was an amazing conversation.
I appreciate it very much.
This was great. So thank you for listening, everyone. And again, thank you for carving out the time and being on, because if you didn't take a lot of notes and weren't inspired, I listened to conversations like this, and I just think you are the type of person that I want my children to be around, and you are the type of coach that I would have loved to play for. So it was a great, great honor having you on.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you both. I'll be following you. If I can ever do anything, let me know. If you need anything,
love it.
You know how to find me.
Sounds great.
Of course, I'll overbook it, but I'll show up eventually.